The hospital room was eerily silent, save for the soft hum of machines and the steady beep of a heart monitor. Zachary stood frozen at the door, his gaze fixed on his daughter, Ava, lying motionless on the bed. Tubes and wires snaked across her frail body, and the oxygen mask over her face was the only thing keeping her alive. A sense of dread settled in the pit of his stomach as he walked toward her, each step heavy with the weight of his helplessness. He was a man used to making decisions that moved mountains, yet here, in this sterile room, he was powerless. Ava, his precious daughter, the one thing in this world that mattered most to him, was fighting for every breath. As he approached her bedside, the door swung open, and a woman entered, Karen. Her presence was like a chill wind sweeping through the room. There was a coldness to her, a calculated hostility in her every step. Her sharp eyes never left Zachary, and for a moment he felt a flicker of recognition, though he couldn't place it. Without any preamble, Karen spoke, her voice icy. "I'm cutting off her oxygen supply." The words hit Zachary like a punch to the gut. He blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "What?" he asked, trying to mask the growing panic in his chest. Karen didn't flinch. "I don't care who you are or what you think you can do. This is happening." She pointed to the machine that sustained Ava as if it were just another piece of equipment to be switched off at will. Zachary's mind raced. The world outside the sterile walls of the hospital had no idea that the man standing here, trying to hold his composure, was the CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the country. But in this moment, none of that mattered. His identity, his influence, his wealth, it all felt like nothing. The only thing that mattered was Ava. His heart thudded in his chest as he stepped forward. "You need to leave. Now." His voice was calm, but there was a desperation simmering beneath the surface, a desperate plea for this nightmare to end. But Karen was relentless, her eyes gleaming with a hidden agenda. Zachary didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The room grew colder, the air heavy with tension. Karen's presence had shifted from alarming to menacing. Zachary stood beside Ava's bed, his hand gripping the railing, trying to hold on to some semblance of control. His eyes flicked between the woman standing at the foot of the bed and the oxygen mask that was now supplying Ava with the breath she so desperately needed. Karen seemed completely unfazed by the situation, her lips curling into a tight smile, as if this was all a game to her. "I'm serious," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "She doesn't need the oxygen. It's a waste of resources. I'm shutting it off." Zachary's blood ran cold, but he couldn't afford to show fear. He had faced corporate wars, boardroom betrayals, and life-or-death decisions at the top of his multi-billion-dollar empire, but this was a different kind of battle. The one thing that truly mattered in the world was lying on the bed before him, and this woman, this stranger, was threatening to take it all away. "Stop," Zachary commanded, his voice low but firm. "You have no right to do this. You don't know what you're messing with." But Karen only laughed, a hollow sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "You think I care about your rights? I've had enough of people like you, thinking you're untouchable. You're just like the rest, no one cares until it's too late. Well, I'm making sure it's too late for her." Zachary's jaw clenched. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Karen had no connection to Ava, no reason to do this. And yet she was determined to ruin them. Was this personal? Was this some kind of vendetta? He had no idea who this woman was or what had driven her to this point. But one thing was certain, Karen wasn't going to back down easily. The hospital staff had gathered in the doorway, their faces pale, eyes darting nervously between Zachary and Karen. Not one of them dared step forward. Fear had rooted them to the spot. Zachary could feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to do something. But what could he do? He was trapped in this moment, powerless. He turned his attention back to Ava, whose breathing was becoming shallow. The oxygen mask was slipping off her face, the machine's soft beeping the only sound in the room. His heart twisted. He could see the signs, the way Ava's chest struggled to rise and fall, the way her fragile form seemed to weaken with every breath. Her once steady rhythm was faltering, and he was running out of time. Karen watched him, clearly enjoying the fear she had instilled in him. "I told you," she said, her voice like ice. "This is happening. You can't stop me." The words hit him like a freight train. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, to take control of the situation. But he knew he couldn't. He could feel Ava's life slipping further from his grasp. Every second that passed was another second lost. His mind raced, but his options felt so limited. The only person who could stop this madness was Karen, and she was out of control. Zachary's phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't even glance at it. It was irrelevant. Nothing mattered except Ava. He placed his hand on her forehead, his fingers trembling. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Fight. Please stay with me." But the reality was sinking in. He wasn't just fighting for Ava's life. He was fighting for everything that had ever mattered to him. The family he had built, the love that had anchored him through every storm, the future he had dreamed of for Ava. Karen wasn't just threatening his daughter's life, she was threatening the foundation of everything Zachary had worked for. His worst fear had come to life in the most unexpected way. The ruthless woman standing before him had no idea who she was up against. Zachary wasn't just a CEO of a company, he was a father desperate to protect his child, and he would do whatever it took to keep her alive. But Karen wasn't backing down. And the question now was, how far would Zachary go to stop her? The tension in the room was unbearable, each second dragging on like an eternity. Karen stood at the foot of Ava's bed, her eyes cold, her expression almost satisfied. Zachary could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, his mind spinning as he struggled to make sense of what was happening. The oxygen machine's beeping had become more erratic, a shrill sound cutting through the silence, signaling that Ava's life was slipping away faster than he could keep up. He turned back to Karen, his voice now trembling with frustration and fear. "You're crazy. You don't have any right to do this." Karen didn't flinch. "Oh, I have every right, Zachary," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You just didn't recognize me at first, did you?" She stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor, the sound echoing in the stillness. Zachary's heart skipped a beat. His mind was racing. He'd heard her name earlier, but it didn't hit him until now. He had never seen her in person, but he knew her face. Karen Daniels, a former employee of his company. She had been one of the brightest talents. But something had happened, a scandal, an allegation that was never fully understood. She had been let go, quietly and without fanfare, and he hadn't thought twice about it. But now, standing before him, she was not the same woman he remembered. Her eyes were filled with something far darker than professional ambition. Zachary could feel it now, the anger, the years of resentment and bitterness that had built up until it consumed her completely. She wasn't here by accident. She had planned this. You're the one who tried to ruin me, weren't you?" Zachary's voice cracked as the realization hit. The tension in his chest doubled, his hands shaking as he grasped the edge of Ava's bed. He had been too distracted by his rise in power to see the damage left in his wake. He had made enemies, but he never imagined one of them would come for his daughter. Karen smiled bitterly, her voice filled with contempt. "Oh, I tried, all right, but you were too powerful, too untouchable. I knew I could never get you with your board members and your lawyers. But this," she gestured to Ava, the fragile figure in the bed, "this is personal. You took everything from me, Zachary, and now I'm taking the one thing you love more than anything." The oxygen machine emitted another beep, louder this time, and Zachary felt his pulse quicken. Ava's breathing had become shallow. Her small chest heaved as she struggled for air, the mask slipping further from her face. "Please stop," Zachary pleaded, his voice cracking. His body trembled as he took a step forward. "I'll fix everything. I'll make it right. Just don't do this." But Karen didn't seem moved. Instead, she raised her hand to the machine, and with a swift motion, she began to reach for the oxygen valve. "It's too late for redemption, Zachary. Your empire couldn't save you now. You're just a man, just a father, and you can't protect her." His heart lurched as Ava let out a strained gasp, the beeping growing louder, frantic. Time was running out. He had failed to protect her. The one thing he thought he could control, the one thing that mattered most, was slipping through his fingers. In that instant, something within him snapped. He wasn't going to lose his daughter. Not like this. A fierce determination took root within him, a drive he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about survival, about fighting for the one person who had no voice in this battle. He had to stop Karen, and he had to do it now. But the clock was ticking. Ava's life hung in the balance, and Zachary realized that in this moment, it wasn't just about who he was, it was about who he would become in order to save her. Zachary's mind was reeling. His entire world had just been flipped upside down. Karen, the woman standing before him, wasn't just a stranger, she was someone from his past, someone he had unknowingly wronged. And now she had come to exact her revenge. As he stood there, watching Ava's fragile form struggle for every breath, Zachary couldn't help but feel the weight of his failure. With one hand still clutching the side of the bed, he grabbed his phone with the other. He had to dig deeper. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple power play. It was personal now. And Karen, with her cold demeanor and unrelenting resolve, was at the center of it all. But why? As Zachary scrolled through his contacts, his eyes landed on a name he hadn't called in years. Clara, the former head of HR at his company. She had been with the company when Karen was hired and eventually fired. Zachary had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that he'd never questioned the reasons behind Karen's departure. Now, those reasons felt like they were the key to understanding her twisted vendetta. The phone rang, and after a few tense moments, Clara answered. "Zachary," she said, her voice cautious. "Clara, I need information. Do you remember Karen Daniels? The one we let go a few years ago?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Zachary could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. "Yes, I remember her." "Why?" "I need everything you have on her. I need to understand why she's doing this. You need to tell me what happened, Clara. I don't have time to waste." Clara hesitated. Karen, she wasn't just a disgruntled employee, Zachary. She was brilliant but unstable. She had an obsession with making things perfect, and when she wasn't promoted as quickly as she thought she should be, she started accusing everyone of sabotaging her. But that wasn't the worst of it. We had to let her go after a security breach. She was involved in an incident. She compromised some confidential files. It was a big deal. Zachary felt a chill run down his spine. Karen had tried to ruin him professionally, and now it was clear that she was trying to destroy him personally. She never forgave US, did she? No, she never did. After she left, she started sending cryptic messages to upper management, accusing you of favoritism and corruption. But the worst part? Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. She believed you were responsible for ruining her career. And she's been nursing that grudge for years. I'm afraid she's come back to settle the score. The call ended abruptly as Zachary disconnected, his mind spinning. He had never realized how deep Karen's resentment ran. She hadn't just been angry about losing her job, she had felt betrayed by him personally, and now she was making sure he understood the consequences of that betrayal. But Zachary knew that this wasn't over. If he wanted to save Ava, he needed to outsmart Karen, find a way to turn the tables. His role as a CEO had never prepared him for a battle like this. But what he didn't know was that Karen's next move would test everything he had ever known about power and control. As Zachary hung up the phone, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. He couldn't think about the corporate battles or the employees anymore. None of that mattered. It was Ava that mattered now. He needed to stop Karen, but how could he do that when she had the upper hand? He turned toward the hospital staff gathered at the door. The fear in their eyes was palpable. They were just as powerless as he felt. Karen had made it clear that no one was going to interfere, and no one had the guts to stand up to her. Zachary could see the hesitation in the nurses' eyes. They all knew the gravity of the situation, but they were too afraid to act. "Please, someone," Zachary said, his voice cracking under the strain. Help me. Ava needs that oxygen. You have the authority. Call the hospital administrator. Do something. But no one moved. Instead, they exchanged nervous glances, each one waiting for someone else to take charge. Zachary felt his composure begin to slip. His usually calm demeanor, the one that had carried him through countless business meetings and high-pressure negotiations, was faltering. Ava was slipping away, and he was losing his grip on the situation. He turned back to Karen, whose cold eyes never left him. She was watching him, studying him like a predator sizing up its prey. The knowledge that she had already won the battle was written all over her face. You think I'm going to just let you walk out of here with my daughter? Zachary said, his voice rising with the pressure. Karen smiled, a twisted expression of satisfaction. I don't need to walk out with your daughter. You'll do that for me. You'll sign the documents, admit to your mistakes, and then I'll let her live. You're going to pay for everything you've done. Zachary's stomach churned. The walls were closing in, and his time was running out. Every minute that passed brought Ava closer to the edge. He couldn't just stand there anymore. I'm not signing anything, he snapped. You're insane if you think I'm going to let you control me. But deep down, he knew that he needed a plan. He had to act fast. There was no way Karen would back down without a fight, and he couldn't afford to make the wrong move. He needed allies. He needed to regain control of the situation. With the clock ticking in Ava's life hanging by a thread, Zachary knew he had to find a way to break Karen's grip on him. The investigation into her past was just the beginning. Now it was time for him to dig deeper, to uncover what Karen was really after, and figure out how far she was willing to go to get it. The oxygen machine continued to beep erratically, the sound growing louder with each passing second. Ava's breath was becoming shallow, and the mask that had been her lifeline was slipping further off her face. Zachary felt the panic rising within him, the dread of watching his daughter struggle for air clawing at his chest. His hands clenched into fists as he stood at the foot of the bed, his eyes never leaving Ava. Across the room, Karen stood with a cold, almost satisfied smile playing at the corners of her lips. She hadn't moved since their last exchange, standing firm like a sentinel waiting for Zachary to break. And break he was. The walls of the sterile hospital room seemed to close in around him, suffocating him with each breath he took. You can't do this, Zachary said, his voice hoarse, his resolve starting to crack. She's my daughter. I'll do anything to save her. Karen glanced at him with an air of superiority, her eyes narrowing as she took a step forward. Anything you say? She took out a small folder from the inside of her jacket and waved it in front of him. Zachary's pulse quickened as he glanced down at the folder. His heart skipped a beat. What is that? His voice betrayed him. Karen's smile widened, a cruel gleam in her eyes. This, Zachary, is my trump card. She opened the folder and laid several documents on the table between them. Do you remember what happened 5 years ago? She asked, her voice low but filled with an unmistakable satisfaction. The memories hit him like a jolt. 5 years ago, the scandal he had managed to sweep under the rug. It had been a reckless mistake, a choice that cost him dearly, but one that he had buried in the chaos of his rise to the top. He had thought it was gone, forgotten, never to be mentioned again. But Karen had found it. I've been sitting on this for years, she continued, her voice dripping with venom. And now you're going to give me what I want, or this all goes public. Your little empire? Gone. Your reputation? Ruined. Your precious company? Destroyed. Zachary's mind raced as he scanned the papers in front of him. There it was, proof of his involvement in a covert operation that had crossed the line, details of financial misconduct, and a series of shady decisions that had never been exposed to the public eye. Karen had everything. And if she went public with it, his career, his company, everything he had worked for would be obliterated. I can't, Zachary whispered, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. Please, you can't do this. Karen leaned in, her voice now a low whisper. You'll give me what I want, Zachary, or I'll make sure that Ava never breathes another day in this hospital. You're already losing her. Zachary turned his gaze toward his daughter. His heart sank as he saw her face turning pale, the machines beeping louder and more frantic. Every second counted. His stomach twisted with guilt and fear. The weight of the past was crushing him, and now the one thing he could not afford to lose was slipping away. He knew that if he signed whatever documents Karen wanted, if he gave in to her demands, he would be sacrificing everything, his company, his name, and his future. But if he didn't, Ava would die. Karen was right. The choices were agonizingly clear. His company and his legacy were on the line. But in this moment, they meant nothing compared to Ava. How could he choose? How could he possibly weigh one against the other? His mind was spinning, and the walls of the hospital room seemed to close in further. Karen was methodical, ruthless. She had anticipated every move he would make, and now he had to make a choice. In a moment of sheer panic, Zachary felt the weight of his decision crushing him. There was no easy answer, no clear solution. Karen was forcing him into a corner, and he had to figure out how to survive this, how to save Ava, and somehow find a way to retain his integrity. The twisted truth hung heavy in the air. If he didn't give in to Karen's demands, he would lose both his daughter and everything he had worked for. The tension in the room was unbearable. The beeping of Ava's oxygen machine was frantic now, her breathing more labored with each passing second. Zachary stood frozen at her bedside, his hands trembling as he watched his daughter fight for life. The cold sweat that dripped down his back mirrored the panic that gripped his chest. He could feel the weight of the moment settling on him like a lead blanket, suffocating him. He had been here before, boardrooms, corporate showdowns, power plays, but nothing compared to this. He turned his gaze back to Karen, who stood there as cold and composed as ever, with the documents spread out in front of her like a weapon. Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of triumph and contempt. She had him, or so she thought. You think you can just walk in here and threaten me? Zachary's voice broke the silence, and the words came out harsher than he intended. He felt the anger building up inside him, a rush of emotions that threatened to break free. You don't know who you're dealing with. Karen smiled, but there was no humor in it. Oh, I think I do. The man who hides behind his wealth, his empire, his power. The man who thinks he can get away with anything. She took a step forward, the air between them thick with hostility. But none of that matters now, does it? None of your titles, your money, your connections, they mean nothing if you can't protect your own daughter. Something snapped inside of Zachary. He was done playing her game. He wasn't going to stand there and let her manipulate him anymore. Not this time. He wasn't going to let her destroy the one thing that mattered most to him. Ava. He straightened up, meeting her gaze head on. You're right about one thing, he said, his voice now low and steady. None of that matters right now. But what you don't understand is that I'm not just some rich CEO you can throw around. I'm a father, Karen, and I'll do whatever it takes to save my daughter. The shock on Karen's face was immediate, and for the first time, her confidence faltered. Zachary took a step toward her, the fire in his chest burning brighter. I know who you are. I know what you want. But you've made a fatal mistake. You think you can control me with these papers, with this little vendetta of yours. But you're wrong. He let the words hang in the air for a moment, the gravity of what he was about to reveal sinking in. I'm Zachary Alden, CEO of Alden Enterprises. You've been targeting the wrong person. I built this company from the ground up, and everything you think you know about me, you don't. You never did. Karen took a step back, her eyes widening in disbelief. She had thought she had him cornered, thought she could manipulate him into submission. But now, the realization dawned on her. Zachary wasn't just any man. He was someone with the power to crush her, to ruin her plans in an instant. He saw it in her eyes, the shock, the disbelief, and something else, fear. But Karen wasn't one to back down easily. The anger flared in her expression, and she quickly regained her composure. You think this changes anything? She spat. Your name, your title, it doesn't matter. You've ruined my life. You've destroyed everything I worked for. And now I'm going to make you pay. The air was thick with tension, as Zachary's words echoed in the room. The confrontation that had been building for so long was finally here, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Ava's breathing was becoming more erratic, and every passing moment felt like a countdown to disaster. Zachary stepped closer to Karen, his voice rising in fury. "You think I don't know what it feels like to lose everything? You think I don't understand the pain of having your life ripped away from you? I've sacrificed more than you could ever imagine, long nights, missed birthdays, holidays spent alone. Everything I've done has been for my family." His voice cracked, but he didn't care. He couldn't hold it in anymore. "I've worked my entire life to build something for them. I've built an empire. But at the end of the day, it's not the money or the power or the success that matters. It's them. It's Ava. She's my world." His fists clenched at his sides, his chest heaving with emotion. "And now, you want to take that away from me? You want to destroy the one thing I've fought so hard to protect? You don't get to do that. You don't get to win." Karen stood still, her eyes flashing with rage. But there was something else there now, uncertainty. Zachary could see the shift in her demeanor. She had underestimated him. She had thought she could manipulate him, break him, control him. But now, she was face to face with a man who was willing to do anything to protect the people he loved. Zachary took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "You made a mistake, Karen. You've made an enemy out of the wrong person. I'm not just a businessman. I'm not just a CEO. I'm a father. And nothing in this world is stronger than that." For a moment, there was silence. The room felt like it was holding its breath, as if the entire world was waiting for Karen to make her next move. Then, she spoke, her voice low and filled with venom. "You really think you can just erase what I've done? You think you can fix this?" Zachary's eyes never left hers. "No, I can't fix the past, but I can control the future. And the future doesn't have room for people like you." In that moment, Zachary knew that this wasn't just about saving Ava, it was about reclaiming everything that mattered. His family, his integrity, his sense of self. Karen had tried to take everything from him, but he wasn't going to let her. The tension that had filled the room seemed to dissipate, but the battle wasn't over. The final confrontation had begun, and Zachary knew that this was the moment where everything would change. One way or another, this was the end of the line. The aftermath of the confrontation left the air in the room thick with tension, but the storm had subsided for now. Zachary stood at Ava's bedside, watching her shallow breaths slowly regain a more steady rhythm. The oxygen mask, once precariously slipping off her face, was now firmly secured, and the heart monitor's frantic beeping had quieted to a more reassuring pulse. But despite the momentary relief, Zachary knew this wasn't over. Behind him, the hospital staff had finally mustered the courage to act. Security had arrived, and Karen, though defiant until the very end, was now being escorted out of the room in handcuffs, her smugness replaced by a cold fury. For a moment, Zachary allowed himself to close his eyes, the tension in his body slowly easing. But the victory felt hollow. The battle wasn't just for Ava's life, it was for his future, his career, his family. And Karen, even now, wasn't done. As the door to the room closed behind Karen, her voice pierced the silence. "You think this is over, don't you, Zachary?" He turned sharply to face her, his stomach churning with dread. Karen's eyes burned with vengeance as she stood just outside the room, held back by security. She wasn't backing down. No, this wasn't just about Ava anymore. Karen had a final blow to land, and she was savoring every word. "You think you've won, that you've defeated me, but you don't know what's coming." Her words echoed through the air, heavy with the promise of destruction. "I've left you with more than a few bruises. You may have saved your daughter, but you'll never be able to outrun what's coming for you, for your company, for everything you've built." Her voice was sharp, and the bitterness in it was undeniable. Zachary felt his pulse quicken as she continued, her words like daggers aimed at everything he held dear. "Alden Enterprises, I've got people. People who have been waiting for the right moment. You've been hiding behind your wealth, your power, but you can't hide from this. You can't protect your empire anymore." The weight of her words crashed down on him, and for the first time in hours, he felt truly powerless. Karen had made sure that Zachary knew just how vulnerable he was. She had weaponized the one thing that Zachary could never recover from, his reputation. Karen's final words rang in his ears as security pulled her further away. "I'm just getting started." As the door clicked shut behind her, Zachary felt his knees nearly buckle beneath him. He had won the battle for Ava's life, but Karen's threats had left a darker shadow looming over him. His empire, his legacy, his future, everything he had worked for, felt as fragile as Ava's breath had moments ago. The hospital room felt quieter now, but the silence was deafening. Ava was stable, but Zachary was not. The weight of Karen's threat gnawed at him like a constant ache in his chest. He paced back and forth in the sterile room, his thoughts swirling in a chaotic frenzy. He needed answers. He needed to know exactly what Karen had meant when she said he couldn't hide anymore. Was it just a bluff, a desperate attempt to regain control over the situation, or was there truth in her words? Zachary knew that Karen wasn't one to make empty threats, but how far had she gone to bring him down? What did she have on him? And how could he stop her before it was too late? He turned back toward Ava, who was still resting peacefully, the steady rise and fall of her chest the only reassuring sign in the room. She had fought so hard to stay alive, and Zachary couldn't help but feel a surge of guilt. He had promised her he would always protect her, but had he done enough? Was she truly safe now, or was this just the beginning of something darker? Zachary sank into the chair beside Ava's bed, his hands running through his hair as he tried to process everything that had just transpired. The sense of defeat that had lingered in his chest was overwhelming. His entire life had been spent in a constant pursuit of success, building his empire, securing his future, providing for his family. But now, it felt like all of that was in jeopardy. The phone in his pocket buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. He pulled it out, but the name on the screen only deepened his sense of dread. Clara, his former head of HR. With trembling hands, he answered. "Clara?" "Zachary, I don't know how to say this, but we've got a problem." Her voice came through, urgent and strained. "I've been going through the records from your company, the ones Karen had access to. I don't think it's just her. She wasn't acting alone." His heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" "There's a network. I don't know who's involved, but I'm certain Karen wasn't working on her own. Someone's been feeding her information. Your company, your private files, everything is compromised, and I'm afraid it's not just a personal vendetta anymore. There's something bigger at play here, Zachary. You're not just dealing with Karen anymore. Someone else is pulling the strings, and they've been planning this for a long time." Zachary felt his world crumble further. This wasn't just a personal attack. It was a corporate war, a battle for everything he had ever built. Karen had been the spark, but now he realized there was a much darker force behind her. And this time, Zachary didn't know if he was ready to face it. "Clara," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I need to know everything. Now." The pressure that had been building inside him was about to break. He had already lost so much, his family, his empire. How much more could he afford to lose before it all came crashing down? The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Zachary was about to be thrust into the battle of his life, and he couldn't back down now. Not for Ava, not for his legacy, not for anything. For a few fleeting hours, Zachary allowed himself to believe that everything was finally falling into place. Ava was stable. The hospital had ensured her oxygen was back at full capacity, and she was finally resting peacefully. The nightmare that had gripped his life seemed, for a moment, to be over. But deep down, Zachary knew the calm was only temporary. The looming threat of Karen and her cryptic words still hung over him, gnawing at him with every breath he took. She had promised that he would pay for his past mistakes, and now he couldn't shake the feeling that something far more devastating was waiting just around the corner. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was an encrypted message from Clara, his former head of HR. With trembling fingers, he opened it. "Zachary, I found something. I don't know what to make of it, but you need to see this. It's bad. Really bad." His heart dropped. Minutes later, Zachary was pacing in the hallway outside Ava's room, his phone in hand. The message from Clara included a link, and he hesitated before clicking on it. What could be worse than what he had already been through? He pressed play. The video started grainy but soon cleared. It showed a familiar scene, an old office building, dimly lit. And then Zachary saw himself. He was younger in the video, but unmistakably him. In the background, the sound of hushed voices and muffled screams could be heard. He was speaking to someone, his expression sharp and controlled. The scene shifted, and the camera zoomed in on the face of a woman, one he recognized only too well. Karen. But this wasn't the same woman standing before him now. This woman in the video had a terrified expression, her eyes pleading for something Zachary didn't understand. The video continued to play as Zachary's past began to unfold in front of him, a twisted revelation that sent shockwaves through his entire body. Clara's voice came through the phone, soft and shaken. "Zachary, do you remember her?" The realization hit, like a freight train. This woman in the video, Karen, was not the Karen he had known. The video revealed something far more sinister. It was a tragedy, a corporate cover-up that Zachary had tried to bury, and now Karen was using it as her final weapon against him. The video continued, showing Zachary's younger self ruthlessly making a deal with a business partner, one that led to the tragic downfall of a young employee. Karen had been that employee. The video exposed her as a whistleblower, the person who had tried to expose the shady practices Zachary had been involved in, practices that led to the wrongful death of an innocent woman, an affair that Zachary had done everything to cover up. And now it all made sense. Karen wasn't just seeking revenge for being fired. She was seeking justice for what had happened years ago, for the person who had been silenced. Her anger wasn't just personal, it was fueled by a deep-seated desire to right the wrongs that Zachary had swept under the rug. Zachary's stomach turned as the video played on. The gravity of his past sins settled into him like a cold weight. He had done this. He had destroyed lives to protect his empire. And now Karen had found the perfect way to bring him to his knees. He stared at the screen, paralyzed. "No," he whispered, barely able to comprehend what he was seeing. This was the ultimate betrayal, not just from Karen, but from himself. His past mistakes, his arrogance, and his desire to climb higher had led to the tragic death of a young woman and the fall of Karen. All of it was unfolding in front of him. Suddenly, Ava's soft voice broke through his fog. "Daddy, is everything okay?" Zachary snapped back to reality, his heart racing. He looked at her, her eyes still heavy with exhaustion, but filled with innocence. Her fragile form lay there, unaware of the storm that had just been unleashed. Zachary couldn't let her know. Not yet. As he wiped a tear from his cheek, he made a silent vow to her. He would protect her. He had to. He wouldn't let Karen destroy everything he held dear. But the truth of his past, the lies he had built his life upon, those could not be erased. Karen had won. She had uncovered his darkest secret, and she was using it to destroy him from the inside out. The only question that remained now was how far she was willing to go, and whether Zachary could stop her before she completely ruined him. With a deep breath, Zachary stood up, knowing what he had to do. The battle wasn't just about saving Ava anymore. It was about facing his past, about coming clean, about exposing the truth. Only then could he truly protect everything he loved. And so, the true fight began, not just against Karen, but against himself. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the hospital room, casting a warm, golden light across the sterile walls. Zachary sat at Ava's bedside, his hand gently resting on hers, feeling the steady rhythm of her breath. It was a moment of calm after the storm. Ava was stable now, and the worst of the crisis had passed, but the battle was far from over. As Zachary sat there, lost in thought, he knew what he had to do. Karen's threats had shown him the depths of his own failings, and he could no longer hide from the truth. For years, he had buried the mistakes of his past, using his power and influence to keep everything under wraps. But Karen had made him confront the ugly reality he couldn't keep running from the consequences forever. He had called a meeting with his board members earlier that morning, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The boardroom was silent as Zachary stood at the head of the table. The executives, all eyes on him, waited for him to speak to address the crisis that was about to unfold. Zachary had prepared for this moment, but the words still felt foreign, as though they were being forced out of him by some invisible force. He cleared his throat and began, his voice steady but tinged with remorse. I have something to tell all of you. Something I should have addressed years ago. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The weight of his words pressed on him. But he knew this was the only way forward. He had to come clean. For Ava, for his company, and for himself. I'm not proud of what I'm about to say, he continued. But I can't let this go on any longer. The truth is, I've made mistakes. I've done things to protect myself and my company that I shouldn't have. And it's time that you all know the truth. Karen Daniels wasn't just some disgruntled employee. She was a whistleblower, someone who saw the corruption and the wrongdoings that I allowed to happen under my watch. I'm responsible for the damage, for the loss of life that resulted from my actions. The room was dead silent. The board members exchanged shocked glances, but none of them interrupted. Zachary could feel the weight of their judgment, but he couldn't stop now. He had to own up to everything. I've been living with the guilt of what I did, he admitted, and I know that no amount of money or power will undo the harm I've caused. But I'm here today to take responsibility for it all. I'm stepping down as CEO. Alden Enterprises will no longer be the company I built through deceit. I'm committed to making things right, starting with full transparency and accountability. The fallout from his confession was inevitable, but Zachary had already made peace with it. He had chosen to face the consequences head-on, no matter how painful. As the weeks went by, he worked tirelessly with his legal team, with Karen's support, to rectify the damage done. He reached out to the families affected by the scandal, offering apologies and restitution, knowing that nothing could truly make up for the lives ruined by his negligence. But it was a start. As for Karen, her anger had simmered down once she saw that Zachary was genuinely trying to make amends. She may never fully forgive him, but there was a sense of closure now, an understanding that the cycle of revenge had reached its end. In time, Zachary was replaced as CEO by someone more transparent, more committed to the ethical values he had once ignored. Alden Enterprises underwent a transformation, shifting focus from unchecked ambition to responsible leadership. Back at the hospital, Zachary stood at the window, watching the world go by. Ava was recovering, stronger each day. She had no idea what had just happened to their family, but she would soon grow up in a world that was different from the one Zachary had created, a world where he hoped to be a better man, a man who had learned the hard way that the price of power could be too high if it came at the cost of everything that truly mattered. As Zachary gazed out at the horizon, he knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was finally on the right path. The darkness of his past had been revealed, but now he could move forward, no longer running from the consequences, but facing them with the hope of redemption. He turned back to Ava, her small form resting peacefully in the bed. The storm had passed, and now it was time to rebuild. If you found Zachary's journey compelling, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more intense stories like this. Don't miss out on the twists, turns, and emotional battles that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned for more gripping content. This is just the beginning. Follow HOA Denied Access for more.